The proposal our Players Association received on Thursday was unacceptable and insulting. We all of the quarterbacks in the UFL have collectively decided not to attend the UFL quarterback training camp this weekend in Arlington, Texas, in proposal of that proposal and the message that it was sent to us players. So that is where the story ended right there. That is kind of the beginning of everything. And then James Larson has all of the players who signed it. The UFL put out the following statement. The United Football League continues to negotiate in good faith with the players union to finalize a collective bargaining agreement, which will be beneficial both to the players and the league, close quote. We have a whole breakdown of what the players' compensation was in 2024. So basically, the UFPA got the current proposal on February 21st with a negligible increase in player compensation over the last year. Basically, the players were making $5,500 per week. They wanted more, plus they wanted year-round health insurance. That's kind of where it's at. So players are asking for a bump in pay and year-round health insurance. We are hearing from sources that it could cost the UFL $2.5 million per season just for health insurance year-round. The problem is, we all know ticket sales are down, so that ain't happening. That is kind of how things kind of played out. Pat McAfee weighed in on the walkout situation, which was one of the things that I was like, yes, let's get Pat McAfee to talk about the UFL. And they didn't even know about the UFL even being in a thing. He basically said that these NFL teams all have 4 or 5 quarterbacks, and very young quarterbacks that's good is going, or potentially good is going to be into the NFL. So they can't join the NFL. It's like what level of competition you have. OGs, remember AJ McCarron? Yeah, playing there. There's some guys that have become spring football legends, talking about Jordan Tama. So quarterback play in spring football has always been a challenge. Spring football has its fair share of hype backup NFL players that play, and then they come down and they're bust. So not everyone that is good is in the NFL. Let's make that crystal clear. It's better for quarterbacks in spots 4 and 5 on the NFL to play in the UFL rather than sit on the bench. Clearly, the pay is the problem. PJ Walker, Ben DiNucci, Adrian Martinez, and even the aforementioned AJ McCarron all had successful runs from the UFL, XFL, and playing in the NFL. So they basically go on to talk about it. I kind of broke down the things that they had said, and basically like how it wasn't quite correct. But one of the show highlights marketing challenges facing the UFL. AJ Hawk said the following. He said, to be fair, though, I mean, maybe I'm going to live under a rock. I wasn't sure the league was happening until I heard these guys were holding out. Didn't really know. Didn't even know year 2 was around the corner either. And this is the problem. AJ Hawk is on ESPN, and ESPN people didn't know that the league was even happening. And that's the problem. We've talked about that in the past. I proposed that Daryl Johnson appear on Pat McAfee to talk about it. None of that stuff happens. So the UFL has been getting a lot of run based on this walkout, the strike thing. That has been basically the only news being reported about the UFL in the offseason, which isn't what you really want. But they're talking about it. We move on. So that happened. Then on March 5th, Front Office Sports reporting that the start of the UFL season could be in jeopardy. Now remember, Front Office Sports is owned by Redbird IM, which is the parent company of Redbird Capital, which owns half of the United Football League. So sources for this article are people clearly on the inside. So this is what made the report more viable and more interesting, because they have people on the inside that clearly their ownership owns the league. They said the start of the UFL season, second season, could be in jeopardy if labor talks don't improve. A source familiar with negotiations told Front Office Sports. We go through the whole thing about the quarterbacks, how they said it was insulting. The walkout did move the needle a little bit. So the quarterback's actions led the UFL to make a new proposal, which was enough of an improvement in health care and player salaries to get players to training camp, according to a source familiar with the negotiations. The players want to see the league further improve its offer, which is why a new collective bargaining agreement remains unsigned as of Tuesday morning, which is almost a week ago. The report goes on to say the relationship between the UFL and United Football Players Association as shaky. They said players are prepared to take more labor actions during training camp if the UFL remains dug in its current offer. That's kind of where it stands now. I break down kind of front office sports and their articles that they had published. Clearly, they're an arm of the UFL marketing machine per se. Clearly, because of the articles that I even pointed out, the UFL is primed for success if it can resist its impulse for hyper-growth. That came from front office sports, which then other people read. And then the Army story was basically closed out saying it was resolved. That was also from front office sports article that got there. Now on, as we move further down, March 6th, Mike Mitchell has an article talking about the UFL players have introduced another hurdle in the league's climb to viability. And he kind of breaks down everything that's going on. But the main thing that he kind of talked about, he had gotten some quotes here. He says, things seem to be getting worse from an optical standpoint after the initial reports of the player strikes. Players confirmed to ESPN that labor negotiations took a turn this week. The bottom line, let's see where he had that one piece, basically saying that this could hurt the league. He had somebody, this is it. As a top UFL executive conveyed to him, he said, we might concede and do what it takes to get on the field in 2025, but it may come at the expense of a 2026 or 2027 season. That is something to keep in mind here. It's like, yes, you want all these things, but we want to expand in 2026 and 2027, but this was not in the budget, and that might be a problem too. It's not like season ticket sales are going great, which is a revenue source, and they know they're going to lose money. They do have money. It's very difficult thing, but that is a very key piece of the puzzle, that this could come at the expense. Like they're going to get on the field this year, give the players what they want. But as soon as the season's done, if it's like not where their numbers are or wherever they thought they could go to year 2, they could shut it down. Then the next story continues. So then there's media day that came up. And this is where the players get their pictures taken. They do videos and all this stuff that are used for bumpers and highlight things and all stuff throughout the season. There was a rumbling that the players might not report to the media day. And then there was a threat that basically they would get cut if they didn't show. But it was kind of an understanding. And so ESPN, which is of course part owned by the UFL, had an update to the story. So the ESPN put out this story that the players were threatened to get cut if they didn't appear on media days. So Kevin Seifert reported that 3 players told him that the United Football League would release any player that did not appear on media day. I explain all that, but they all were there. UFL Executive Vice President of Football Operations Daryl Johnson clarified the statement to ESPN. He said, so I stress to our coaches there's some talk that there could be an opportunity to boycott this event. And just please let the guys know how important this is, not only to us as a league, but to them as individual players. And the league will look at this as conduct detrimental to the league, which could raise to the level of termination. We're not going to get cut. You're not going to get cut, but it can raise to that level. So he kind of was like, maybe it was kind of taken a little bit too far. Who knows? It seemed that the rumblings grew overnight and players were getting upset by that ultimatum. So Johnson reached out to the coaches again. He said, so we came back Wednesday last night and we added clarity to the situation and told them exactly what our stance was going to be and how it would be handled and what the consequences would be. They had a clear understanding. So basically he kind of cleared it up of a cleared understanding. And then they go on to talk about trying to get a deal done and et cetera. So that was media day, and that was March 6th. So now we move forward. 5 days ago, the UFLPA released a statement on social media, which made it more interesting, is the player union called out Fox Sports by name. So he said, this is the United Football League, NFLPA. We're proud to stand in solidarity with the players of the UFL as they fight as they fights for a contract ahead of the UFL season. It's time for Fox Sports and other UFL owners to show the players respect and give them the fair wages and healthcare coverage that they deserve. And there it is, the social media post there. Now, we have reported on UFL News Hub how the past that the NFLPA had the option to pick up the UFL players and chose not to after the United Steelworkers USW agreement ended in 2024. Basically, the United Steelworkers were not going to come back, and they basically mutually decided to part ways, and then that was it. But we've heard from sources that all season long, all during the off season, and any kind of phone call with the upper management, there was always a representative from the NFL on that call. And I think that's very important to point out, that the NFL is totally involved in this league. And I have my theories as to why. But to me, this was interesting because it was the first time the NFLPA got involved in any of the spring league stuff at any time. I mean, there was silence when the XFL declared bankruptcy during COVID. There's still stuff like in the bankruptcy courts about, getting checks and, when guys were left with hotel bills, like that's still going on right now. And there wasn't a peep from the NFLPA during that time. Now, so we've heard from sources that, the labor strife was just a couple of disgruntled players over pay, but now and some players are like, we don't care. Like we're playing no matter what. Most of the players would not walk out and plan on playing. But then now the NFLPA gets involved. Now, what makes the statement more interesting is NFLPA calling out Fox Sports specifically. That's the part that really kind of got me. These things these statements are combed over and processed to the T, to the comma, to the letter about what specifically they want to say. And to me, like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson would have been a better, more media-grabbing target. Dwayne Johnson and the UFL needs to da-da-da-da-da. They could have used his name, and they didn't. ESPN or Disney would have made more media attention, so to speak, but they didn't use them. Redbird Capital, of course, aside from the sports business insiders and super fans, mainstream news outlets, your average Joe does not know who Redbird Capital is. But you could have said Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. You could have said ESPN. You could have said Disney. That would have moved the needle. Fox Sports was the interesting piece that they named them out. They could have even just said UFL owners, but they had to say Fox Sports. That really kind of jumped out at me. Now, maybe Fox Sports, this is my theory. So Fox Sports, maybe they're the lone holdout. They're the one that, like, Redbird's like, yeah, we're good with this, but Fox Sports is the one that's putting pressure on them. And so by putting Fox Sports out in front, puts pressure on Fox Sports to kind of cave, maybe because they're the lone holdout in the ownership thing, which has always been the problem. I've discussed this before on the podcast. Oliver Luck, one of his things was, he just wanted to deal with one owner, not multiple owners. And you have basically ESPN, Disney, Redbird Capital, barely Danny Garcia and The Rock, and Fox Sports. You have to answer them all. Oliver Luck liked the fact that all he had to answer to was Vince McMahon, and that was it. So that's kind of like my conspiracy, maybe, when it comes to that. But also, it could just be another player union backing another one. The Major League Soccer Players Association, MLSPA, which represents MLS players, also put out a statement a couple days earlier. So just kind of take that for what you will. I just thought it was kind of interesting. And then that, to me, was interesting. And then we move to one step even more interesting. Quentin Dormady, we know him, got traded, tells ESPN his release was due to union activities. So the Memphis Showboats, after only 5 days of camp, Dormady told Kevin Seifert of ESPN that it was over his union activities amid the CBA talks. Now, Dormady was traded from the San Antonio Brahmas to the Showboats in the offseason, was competing for a starting quarterback position under first-year head coach Ken Whisenhunt. E.J. Perry, Troy Williams are also competing for the starting spot. So let's even say E.J. Perry gets the spot, probably him because he played well. Troy Williams also had he was okay. Maybe he's good enough for the backup. But still, Dormady is a veteran of spring football, started 6 games for the Brahmas. They made it all the way to the championship game. He replaced an ineffective Chase Garber in that championship game, but we know superfans, the Birmingham Stallions, won that game. Now, according to the article, Dormady was helping organize players. Quote, Dormady took on an increasing leadership role this month in organizing players' response to the league's CBA proposal, which included discussions about the possibility of boycotting the league's media day last week. So he was involved with that. Now, to play devil's advocate, Dormady is 29 years old and one of the older quarterbacks in the UFL, and it didn't come as a surprise to release him for a younger player. But it was his interactions with new Showboats GM Jim Monos that raised some eyebrows. This is where it gets interesting. Dormady said that on March 8th, Memphis general manager Jim Monos informed him via phone he would be released. Okay. According to Dormady, Monos did not provide an explanation. In a face-to-face meeting on March 9th, Dormady said Monos told him the decision was not based on his practice performance. Now, did he say something else? Did he miss, is Dormady twisting what he said? But that's interesting. On March 10th, Dormady said he received a text attributing the decision to his accuracy and footwork. Interesting. He goes on to tell ESPN, I've been very open about trying to help lead the negotiations here to get us to where we can get to a place to finish this and come to a resolution. But when we're at a standstill because the league refuses to even meet us a third of the way, which gives you an idea of how far they off, whatever they mean by a third of the way. And maybe that's salary. So I think that this was a deal where it's like, let's chop off a head off and make this another way that can threaten people. UFL spokesman released a statement. Our teams are engaged in various camp transactions during training camp, including free agency signings, moving players to injured reserve, waivers, and terminations. In fact, through 8 days of camp, 24 players have been released. Any player transaction is purely a result of football decision at the team level and nothing to do with collective bargaining negotiations. So it'll be interesting to see if Dormady gets picked up by another UFL team as we get closer to the season, a spring football veteran with UFL experience. If a quarterback goes down, practice team could call him, or has the league moved on with him? That will be an interesting thing to find out, especially now that he has talked to somebody from ESPN, who also ESPN owns part of the UFL. So all these people that are reporting, getting these inside scoops, actually are part owner of the league, which just makes this whole thing kind of weird. So that is where we stand on March 12th, 2025, when it comes to this labor thing. I just keep telling people, I hear both sides. I hear players are not going to report. I hear players are going to report. If they don't, this whole thing could just sink the league. And that's kind of the problem. I get what the players that, they have to train year round. It's only for 6 months. These are big, billion-dollar companies that, they can't fork over an extra $1 million to cover some of these salaries, like really. But they're also losing $40 to $50 million, which they knew they would. So it's really a tough situation. And this is the first time, between the USFL. There was some kind of labor stuff, and then the XFL, there wasn't really. There was, remember they were going to do things, and then all of a sudden they changed it when the USFL, the XFL was going to do something, and then they were going to have this certain pay raise, and then the AAF went under, and then they changed their tune. Players have kind of taken it, but it's interesting that this time the players aren't going to take it. I wonder if they have more leadership when it comes to UFPA versus the steelworkers. Or is UFPA on over their head? We've had leadership from the UFLPA on our podcast talking about what's going on there. So we're just gonna have to kind of see how this plays out. Let us know what you think in the comments. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. And this is where things stand right now with the labor activities, and I'm concerned for the 2025 season. I got my season tickets. I'm good to go. I think the marketing is starting to crank up. We're getting closer. I'm super excited to hang out with people at the games and going to the DC Defenders games. But I am concerned about this labor thing. It's just something that we're going to have to keep an eye on.